So can everybody still see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Well, hi everybody, my name is Jim Moore, and I'm actually an applied research project instructor for the Master of Arts in Psychology program at the Chicago School. And welcome to today's panel discussion on APA pitfalls and common challenges that happen to students with APA-style writing. This is just going to be an open forum panel discussion both for instructors who dial in, faculty, staff, students, and if everybody has an opportunity to kind of share their thoughts or questions or concerns. I have a couple of slides to kind of use as a guideline, and we can kind of talk about some of the items on those slides, and then open the floor up to a general discussion too about different pitfalls and things from our own experiences, and kind of just have a combined collaboration. Sound good? Great. Looks like everybody is in agreement. So the panel moderators today are actually myself, and I already noted kind of my background as an ARP instructor, and also Jamie Patterson, who's a dissertation writing expert for the doctoral students. Jamie, did you want to say anything else about your background?
Hi, everybody. My background is that I spent much of my time over the last 8 years with APA Digital, and I love to talk about it. So feel free to ask any questions you have, and hopefully we'll have answers.
And just so you guys know, too, on the call, I'm an instructor at the school, and I'm also in the doctoral organizational leadership program, and just started my second year in that program as well. So like Jamie was saying, I definitely have to refer to the APA manual a lot with writing, not only for the students I work with, but for my own work that I do as a student as well. So the National Day on Writing, that's kind of what prompted a lot of the different seminars and things that are happening today. And for the students, you should have gotten an email about some of the different webinars and things happening today. And really kind of the importance, I'm just going to kind of go over it real quick just so you know, is to kind of talk about different varieties of writing that are out there. And that's what really kind of in the education world prompted promotion of having a National Day on Writing, and to also kind of talk about the necessity of writing instruction and why it's important to kind of provide guidance to students on writing style, and that it's really a lifelong process, that you'll always need writing in different areas you work in, and also in terms of development, you'll always be developing skills in writing and learning new things. I know I always have throughout early years in school up till now. I'm still constantly learning new things with writing, and also to encourage writing and really kind of showcase its value, and not only in writing in psychology and using APA style, but all different kinds of writing, whether it's editorial writing, poetry. I mean, there's such an impact in terms of what writing has in everything we do, and really what the goal of professionals who focus on the National Day of Writing is to kind of immerse students in writing and to familiarize students with how to write correctly in terms of different styles and approaches, and to really just kind of communicate the value that writing has. And if you want more information, this great link here has kind of a background on the National Day on Writing and why it's celebrated and kind of its history and things. Also, Wikipedia has a good link as well to talk about the National Day on Writing if you're interested in learning more. So why APA? Really what the importance of APA style is in writing and psychology is it provides a set standard for a broader academic audience. It really kind of provides a background in terms of writing objectively and scientifically when discussing information pertaining to the social sciences, and basically provides a standard formatting for that information. And it was established by behavioral and social scientists to kind of convey information that really kind of provides a specific scientific standard. And it allows the reader to focus on research and the manner in which it was presented so that the audience or readers don't lose focus of what's being discussed and its implications and importance in terms of the field of social science. And it's used for a wide range of different assignments that can include things from term papers, research reports, empirical studies, literature reviews, theoretical articles, methodological studies, and just so you know, yeah, for students who are both at the doctoral level or master's level, there's a lot of different areas pertaining to APA style in terms of understanding its importance and really kind of knowing the details behind it and its use and applicability. So I think, no matter what level you're at in terms of your education in the social sciences, it's really important to kind of be aware of using correct APA style and also kind of have a knowledge of some of the different pitfalls that can occur. And that being said, now I'm going to kind of go into some of those pitfalls so we can kind of open the floor up for discussion on this. But really, we'll start off with just some common mistakes. And this happens a lot in terms of writing and citations. And I've cited and noted the different sections of the APA manual where some of these items are discussed as well for your reference. So for the students on the line, I definitely suggest acquiring the APA manual 6th edition if you don't have it yet. A lot of the information that we're going to talk about, some of the pitfalls and things, can be found within that manual, and you can always refer back to that to get more guidance and information on it. But the first thing to kind of talk about, and I wanted to note, was, and again, I'm kind of going on my own experience from working with students. I'm sure the other instructors and staff and faculty on the line can also kind of share some of their experiences as well, both from working with doctoral level students to master's level students. But the first area I wanted to kind of talk about was citing information. And in terms of using authors, and when there's two authors, the use of the word and the ampersand, and that there's a difference with parenthetical citations at the ends of sentences and citations that are within the text, and kind of understanding those differences that you use and within the text citations, and then and at the end of sentences in the parenthetical citation. And I guess for others on the call, if you ever have any questions about this or find that being a common mistake among students, I've even had instructors in my past who sometimes didn't provide the correct information sometimes. So I think this can be lead to some confusion sometimes. Does anybody else on the line have anything to share about that? Well, I am going to take silence for a no, and hopefully I explained it. For the students on the line, do you understand kind of the difference between using and ampersand when there's two authors being cited? I will take silence again that everybody understands. I'm just going to keep kind of talking about some of the different things. And it looks like somebody said, one of the students said it is confusing. Yeah, I think, it's just kind of important to be aware of when you use the different types and the differences there. And that use and actually in the writing when you're talking about two authors in the text, whether it's, say, for example, Johnson and Anderson studied X, Y, and Z, you'll spell out the word and, whereas when you have parentheses here at the end of sentences, you use the ampersand. And that's kind of the difference between the two. Does that make sense? Oh, it looks like somebody else provided some good OJ. Well, to kind of keep talking about some other common mistakes, another area relates to numbers in sentences. And this is another common area in terms of like the differences between spelling out numbers and just writing numbers, and some of the fundamental differences that occur here. And here's some high-level points to kind of remember. For numbers that are less than 10, you always want to generally spell those out. So if you have, like, say, you're just saying the number 5, spell out 5. If it's 10 or more, you can go ahead and just typically write it in this fashion. There's going to be a lot of other instances too, and again, this is really well discussed in the EPA manual, but also too, if you're referring to things like specific measurements, you typically just want to use the numerical use of the word or the number as opposed to spelling it out. But also, in terms of spelling it out, one thing to remember too is if you're using numbers at the beginning of a sentence, you want to spell out the number there. So if your sentence starts with, say, something like 12 individuals did X, Y, and Z, you want to make sure you spell out the word 12 and not just write the number at the beginning of the sentence. And I know, at least from working with master's students, that's something that happens pretty commonly. So for all those prospective master's students or current master's students on the phone, try to remember that as a helpful pointer in avoiding that pitfall. Does anybody else have anything to add about numbers that they want to talk about? Anybody have any questions about using numbers? I'm going to assume silence means no, everybody's okay, but I think some of those things I just mentioned are important to kind of remember between the distinguishing of like spelling out the numbers and just listing numbers is sometimes that can be a really common mistake that happens. So, my recommendation is just kind of make sure you familiarize yourself with the general formatting guidelines for that so you avoid kind of making mistakes in that area in the writing. And then another common area relates to, and I didn't note it here, but it kind of precedes this, and I'm going to transition into talking about it too, is subject and verb agreement, and making sure that your tenses align correctly with what you're describing, and that it goes back to the original subject, and that there's agreement there in the writing. And also kind of remembering who you're talking about. When inanimate objects typically are referred to as that, and people are referred to who. And for example, if you're referring to an object like a building, that building is big. Or in a person, you would say the woman who debated the bill, not the woman that debated the bill. So you kind of want to remember distinguishing those as well, as that's another kind of common area where pitfalls happen in the writing and things. Does anybody else have anything to add to this discussion? Or does anybody have any other questions or concerns? I will take silence for a no again. But some of the things I also wanted to kind of talk about in terms of making sure you avoid some of those common pitfalls I was talking about and things are, I cited all the different areas in the APA manual 6th edition to kind of go through and talk about, but also to make sure you go through, there's some really good tutorials on the web as well. If maybe you don't have time to go through each individual section of the APA manual and read through it, or if you're waiting to get the manual, you could always go online and kind of refer to things as well. And some really good tutorials. There's one on APA style, and I've provided the link here, and it's through the actual APA manual, and this provides a really good kind of basics tutorial and really goes through a high level of some of those pitfalls I was talking about. And like I mentioned, the other link that's really helpful is the Purdue Online Writing Lab, or known as OWL. And that, personally, I use a lot for students in terms of providing, a lot of times when I give feedback to students on writing style and things, I'll provide links to OWL for different areas and sections relating to citing and formatting, because I find it really helpful at explaining it at a high level that students can quickly access and understand. And we did have another question come through the chat box, and it notes, one of the students noted, common issues I have is comma abuse and wordiness. Any suggestions? And my suggestion with this, and I think this kind of goes into talking a little bit about like the Oxford comma and things, and my advice in terms of writing style is I think you want to be careful with overuse of commas and split sentences up if you can. And it's commonly referred to as if you have more than one comma in a sentence, it's kind of considered like a comma splice, which means you're really kind of bordering on a fragmented sentence at that point. And if that's the case, you want to either separate it as a separate sentence or use a semicolon or a hyphen if you can to kind of delineate some of that information. But you want to avoid definitely overusing commas for sure. A lot of times I think semicolons are helpful if you're kind of using two sentences but don't want to separate the sentence. Or if you can, just try to separate the sentence. And in terms of like paragraph structure and things, I know typically the writing rubric, the Chicago School indicates 3 to 5 sentences per paragraph. I think that's kind of the standard in terms of paragraph length. So you want to avoid trying to write too lengthy of paragraphs or too short of paragraphs. If you have less than 3 sentences, that's too short of a paragraph. It needs to be longer than that. It needs to be at least a minimum of 3 sentences. And typically, I would suggest paragraphs don't exceed 6 sentences. I think 6 sentences is a good kind of framework. Like I said, the rubric says 3 to 5, but I think 6 is kind of a good cutoff, and somewhere between, I would say, 4 to 6 sentences is typically a good length for paragraphs. Oh, and Jamie noted page 88 has the rules on commas, and that might be helpful. Also, 65 to 67 has information on writing concisely. And yeah, I think that's a really good point as well in terms of being concise and not using the same types of words over and over to repeat what you're saying and abusing words to an extent. I think that happens a lot where sometimes students fall into these traps of saying one word and then saying basically the same word in the same sentence that means the exact same thing. So I think you want to try to avoid that as well. And kind of going to those pages that Jamie was talking about, that's a really good suggestion in terms of the information they provide in the manual about, just writing in an active way of saying things and just using words necessary to convey what you're trying to say and not using an excessive amount of words so that you fall into this trap of wordiness and things. So I think that's definitely something to be aware of. And the student who asked the question said, yes, I can be a bit redundant. And I think for the student who noted that too, another suggestion I would have in terms of concise writing is writing actively too and not using passive writing. I think when you use passive writing, that leads a lot to wordiness. State what was doing, who did the action or what's being referred to, and not relying on this kind of lengthy, passive way of getting around to the point. I think that'll kind of help as well in terms of making your writing more concise and also kind of reducing the wordiness of that. And Latrice, who's a dissertation writing expert at the school, also noted, try to start a new paragraph when beginning a new idea or direction in the topic. That's a really good suggestion as well. That kind of helps the flow of your paragraphs, I think, and kind of helps the fluidity of them. And, when you're starting new ideas, that will kind of help with the transition. You kind of want to transition from going to one idea